This month marks the 25th anniversary of Batman Forever. I wasn't planning on making a video about it for two reasons. The first being that I already did an anniversary video, that one commemorating 15 years since Batman Begins. A much better movie. But the other reason is because you really can't talk about Batman Forever without talking about its direct sequel, Batman and Robin. The two have become so intertwined with each other that to discuss one without the other really does a disservice to both. So I wanted to wait until there was a specific reason to talk about both films at the same time. Unfortunately, because this is 2020, bad news had to happen for me to talk about both movies. This week, Joel Schumacher, the director of both Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, passed away at age 80. He left behind a very impressive body of work featuring cult classics like The Lost Boys and Falling Down, really interesting dramas like A Time to Kill and The Client. He made stylish thrillers like 8mm and Phone Booth. He even directed a bunch of episodes of House of Cards. He had a very impressive resume by any standard. But perhaps unfairly, he will forever be remembered as the guy who made two Batman movies that everybody hates. The man who put nipples on the Batsuit and who turned the Dark Knight detective into a complete buffoon. But these movies seem to have a very different legacy than many other bad movies. Whereas most comic movie misfires are quickly forgotten, the Schumacher Batman films have been reevaluated, restudied, revered, redeemed, and even reviled all over the course of 20 years. Whereas other excessive 90s blockbusters like Wild Wild West and Waterworld are merely footnotes in history by this point, only ever being brought up again to serve as punchlines, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin continue to spark such passionate debate amongst fans and critics, the type of debate that acclaimed movies can only dream of having. So today, let's look at the two Joel Schumacher Batman movies and see if we can reevaluate their status in pop culture, because as flawed as they may be, they do offer a very unique take on the Caped Crusader, the likes of which we may never see again. So I guess we should just get this out of the way right now. I don't particularly like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. I don't outright hate them. I think there's a merit worth discussing in both of these films, but they're just way too flawed for me to ever really consider them classics. They rely way too heavily on camp and campy elements at the expense of any semblance of human emotion. Many of the characters are either poorly written, poorly acted, or usually both. The visual aesthetic and the jokes have not aged very well, and watching them, especially now, you really do get the sense that you're watching a toy commercial rather than a movie. Schumacher's Batman films, of course, followed in the footsteps of Tim Burton's Batman and Batman Returns, two very acclaimed movies that not only helped set the standard of what Batman movies should be, but also gave the whole superhero genre a darker edge that it hadn't really seen in the mainstream up until that point. But whereas Tim Burton's Batman was very gritty and mature, Joel Schumacher's Batman, on the other hand, was more campy and colorful. Tim Burton's Batman was for adults, while Joel Schumacher's was clearly for children. Tim Burton's Batman was also very tough and masculine, whereas Joel Schumacher's Batman was gay. Really, really gay. Infamously, after Batman and Robin failed at the box office, it would be another 8 years before we saw Batman again on the big screen. In 2005, Christopher Nolan released Batman Begins, a movie that would put the character back on track and reinterpret him and redefine him for a whole new generation. But the cloud of the Schumacher Batman films has hung over the character ever since the release of Batman and Robin, sort of acting as a warning sign to other creators as just what might happen if you go too far in a campy direction. And if you ask me, I'm pretty sure that's why we haven't seen a live-action version of Robin since 1997. The character's association to the Schumacher movies is just too ingrained in people's minds. And no, The Dark Knight Rises doesn't count. That wasn't technically Robin. And no, Batman vs. Superman doesn't count either, because he's dead. So really, we have Joel Schumacher to thank for making sure that nobody ever dares to make a campy or vaguely silly Batman movie ever again. Leave that crap to the Marvel people. It's okay for Captain America and Bucky to be vaguely affectionate towards each other, but not Batman. Never Batman. Now, when these movies first came out, I was 8 and 10 years old, respectively. To my feeble childhood mind, I really couldn't tell the difference between Michael Keaton's Batman and Val Kilmer and George Clooney's Batman. To me, it was all just Batman, and anything Batman was good. But even back then, I was kind of alone in my opinions. A lot of my friends didn't like Batman Forever when it came out, and pretty much all of them hated Batman and Robin. I wouldn't understand until a couple of years later when I actually started to see the cracks in the foundation after several rewatches. I actually think a lot of people in my age group went through a similar phase, even going so far as to hating all kinds of campy Batman, from the Adam West Show to the comics of the 40s and 50s. Anything that took the character less than serious was considered bad. I eventually did come around to the Adam West Show and the old comics, seeing them for what they were and appreciating them for what they were. But myself, and I know many other people out there, took a very long time to come around to the Schumacher movies. Still to this day, many people consider them to be pure trash. But as I sit here now, a mildly fat man with a receding hairline in his early 30s, I can't help but feel like I was way too hard on Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. They're not perfect films and they're very flawed, but they each offer a unique take on the character with many inspiring moments that do feel like true Batman moments in their own way. And really, they're not that far off from what Tim Burton was doing in his Batman movies. I realized this while rewatching Batman Returns a few years ago. Now, Batman Returns is a lot of people's favorite Batman movie, even more so than Batman 89. A lot of people really like it for its very dark tone and its very creative visual aesthetic. And I really liked Batman Returns growing up, which makes what I have to say next not only controversial, but I'm sure it's gonna make me a lot of enemies. Batman Returns is not only aged terribly, but it's just as campy and flamboyant as anything found in the Schumacher films. No, I'm not kidding. Batman Returns features a lot of weird, gaudy costumes, over-the-top performances from its lead villains, and a femme fatale character who vamps it up to the extreme. Batman and Robin also happens to feature a lot of weird, gaudy costumes, an over-the-top performance from its lead villain, and a femme fatale character that vamps it up to the extreme. Both movies really do go down the same road. The only difference is that Batman Returns takes the Munster-mobile down that road, while Batman and Robin takes the bus from Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And Schumacher's Batman movies really do have a lot to offer in terms of style. They just don't make movies that look like this anymore. Movies with big, fantastical urban settings, really stylish character designs, and a lot of way, this was a precursor to things like The Brave and the Bold or even the Arkham games. I mean, if you think about it, Brave and the Bold really is just Batman Forever with better jokes. And in terms of the Arkham games, well, compare Bane and Mr. Freeze from the Arkham games to Bane and Mr. Freeze from Batman and Robin, and you tell me what the difference is. A common criticism of the Schumacher movies, especially amongst comic book fans, is that these movies are not faithful to the source material. The characters in these movies don't really act like the way the characters would do in the comics. Now, that's true to a certain extent. Chris O'Donnell's Robin isn't really anything like the Dick Grayson Robin of the comics, and in the movies, Bane is a lumbering brute which is just pure muscle, whereas in the comics he's a brilliant tactician who figured out how to break the bat. But characters like Riddler, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, those are pretty much on par with what we see in the comic books. They're just filtered through the lens of an old children's cartoon rather than an adult drama of the time. If you think about it, Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face is really the same as the animated series Two-Face. He just turned the volume all the way up on his voice.
Let's start this party with a bang!
In the past, I've frequently used clips of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze making a lot of ice puns to illustrate just how bad of a movie Batman and Robin is. But if you think about it, aside from Arnold's casting, there's nothing else particularly wrong with Mr. Freeze. He's still Mr. Freeze. His origin, his motives, his plans even, it's all still there. And lest we forget, the Mr. Freeze of the animated series wasn't above making an ice pun or two himself.
Revenge is a dish best served cold.
And I'm just gonna come right out and say it. Val Kilmer's Batman might just be the most underrated version of this character we've ever seen in live action. He's determined, he's sure-footed and capable, he always knows how to escape a situation alive, and how to make a grand entrance.
Your entrance was good, his was better. The difference? Showmanship.
And his take on Bruce Wayne is a great contrast. It's understated and reserved, pensive, and always contemplating whether or not he's doing the right thing, whether or not his war on crime was even a good idea to begin with. And Kilmer pulls this off effortlessly. He might not have nailed the Batman voice, but Val Kilmer gave Bruce Wayne and Batman their own distinct personas to help illustrate the duality of the character just as well as Michael Keaton did. Plus, Val Kilmer never looks uncomfortable in the Batsuit. At the time, these costumes were notorious for being big and heavy and bulky and hard to move in and very uncomfortable, but here, Val Kilmer doesn't look uncomfortable. He looks like he naturally belongs in it. Whether in photo or in motion, it just seems right. You compare this to even George Clooney, who immediately succeeded Kilmer, and he never looks comfortable in the costume. Hell, even out of costume, he doesn't look like he wants to be there. Given a better script, or possibly if he had a better relationship with Joel Schumacher while filming, who knows what Val Kilmer could have done with this character. Forget about Ben Affleck's unmade Batman movie. The unknown future of Val Kilmer's Batman, to me, is the greatest what if of the Batman movies. Some bad movies get better with time. Spider-Man 3 is now regarded as a fine movie, perfectly in line with the rest of Sam Raimi's trilogy, and the Star Wars prequels, once infamously hated by pretty much everybody, now have their own dedicated fan base with some of the best memes on the internet. And to be fair, Schumacher's Batman movies have been reevaluated fairly positively in recent years, especially Batman Forever. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited for those Hot Toys Batman Forever figures that I will never buy because they're just too damn expensive. But overall, the legacy of Joel Schumacher's Batman movies is a legacy of shame. Shame for taking a movie franchise lauded for its seriousness and turning it into a living cartoon. Shame for prioritizing toy sales over story and characters. Shame for making the whole thing just a little bit too gay. But I think now might be the time to finally realize that we've been very unfair to Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. I don't think they're anybody's favorite Batman movies, but they're certainly not the worst superhero movies ever made. There were bad superhero movies before this, and there have been even worse ones since their release. These are just two movies that were released at the wrong time to the wrong audience. They were expecting a serious Batman movie and they got something campy and silly. If they were released in the 60s around the time of the Adam West Show, then they would have been appreciated for being closer to the Adam West Show. Or hell, if they were released 10 years after Tim Burton's Batman instead of just 3, they probably would be remembered a lot differently than they are now. Because at the end of the day, it's still Batman, it's just a sillier, more kid-friendly version of the character. To add to the pile of silly kid-friendly versions of Batman that already exist and people don't actually seem to hate. It doesn't erase any of the other versions, it doesn't erase Tim Burton's Gothic Avenger Batman, or Christopher Nolan's crime noir Batman, or even Zack Snyder's super aggro Batman. And for the record, so what if these movies are gay? At least they're out and proud. Do you know how many action movies released by Hollywood are super gay but are kind of in the closet? A lot of them. Hell, take Fight Club and replace the word fight with f***.
We're a generation of men raised by women. I'm wondering if another woman is really the answer we need.
I'm sure Joel Schumacher long reconciled with the failures of these movies a long time ago. He went on to have a pretty good career after 1997. But to be hounded and constantly reminded that he was the guy that ruined Batman just seems very unfair and not something I don't think any of us would want to live with. Joel Schumacher did not ruin Batman. He just made two movies that a lot of people didn't seem to like. And while they may not be my favorite versions of the character, I will never turn them off if I happen to be watching them, because they are a part of Batman's legacy after all. It's a big legacy filled with many different versions of the character. This is just one of them. And they are an important part of that legacy. They would go on to inspire other versions of the character and what to do, and in some cases, what not to do. You can't put a price on that. And besides, if they weren't fondly remembered, why would Warner Brothers keep re-releasing them along with the 2 Tim Burton movies? They don't re-release all the bad Superman movies like they do the first one. But what do you think about Batman Forever and Batman and Robin? Do you like those movies? Do you hate those movies? Has your opinion on those movies changed over time? Do you think it's now time that we reevaluate what their status currently is? Let me know down below or anywhere on the internet. I know there was another piece of Batman news that came out this week, arguably a bigger piece of Batman news that I'm sure people wanted me to talk about. But I'm gonna do it next week just to make sure I have all my thoughts and opinions on it written out very clearly, because I got a lot of thoughts and opinions on it, let me tell you. I will have Amazon affiliate links in the description to Batman Forever and Batman and Robin on Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray if you want to watch it again, or maybe you've never seen them before and you want to see what all the hoopla is about. And also some merchandise related to the movies, because maybe you want a Batman and Robin Funko Pop. They don't make Spider-Man 3 Funko Pops. Think about that. And of course, don't forget that we have new videos on this channel every single Tuesday and Wednesday, with Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern being Wulff Den Live. So subscribe to see all of that, like this video, and share it with a friend who doesn't see how anyone can find anything to like about Joel Schumacher's Batman movies. Because you don't have to like the movies to see that Joel Schumacher didn't kill Batman. You can't kill Batman. Batman is forever. Thank you all for watching. I will see you next time. Also, the soundtracks were very good for these.